He looked at her cheap, knitted cardigan and laughed in her face. He called her tacky. He even fired her just to flex his power. But this arrogant billionaire made one fatal, billion-dollar mistake. He didn't know that the poor waitress he was humiliating was actually the world-famous designer he was desperate to hire. We live in a world where image is everything and kindness is becoming extinct. It's exhausting, isn't it? Watching people get judged by the price tag on their shirt rather than the quality of their soul. It makes you lose faith in humanity. But today, we are going to fix that. This is the story of Trent Jones, a ruthless CEO who thought money bought class, and Gabriela, a genius hiding in plain sight. It is a roller coaster of cruelty, patience, and the ultimate vindication. You are about to witness a man dig his own grave, insult by insult, leading up to a reveal so shocking and satisfying it will leave you breathless. Before we watch the mighty fall, join our community of truth seekers. Hit that subscribe button if you love a good justice story. Like this video to show that you value character over clothes, and comment karma below if you're ready to see a bully get exactly what he deserves. Let's dive in. The morning light streamed into opulence with a golden hue, illuminating dust motes that danced around the high society patrons, but the tranquility was abruptly shattered by a raucous, mocking laugh. Trent Jones, a man whose net worth was as massive as his ego, sat like a king on his throne, his tailored suit a sharp contrast to the trembling figure standing before him. He wasn't just sipping his coffee, he was staging a public humiliation, his voice booming across the silent room to ensure everyone witnessed his disdain. "Look at this," he sneered, gesturing wildly at the waitress, Gabriela Hermann, as if she were a blemish on his perfect day. The tension in the room spiked instantly, a thick, suffocating cloud of rich versus poor dynamics that made the other customers shift uncomfortably in their seats. Gabriela stood frozen, clutching her serving tray with white-knuckled intensity, her eyes fixed on the marble floor to hide the sting of his words. She wore a knitted, colorful cardigan that, while eccentric, was clearly made with care, yet to Trent, it was an unforgivable crime against fashion. "Did you get dressed in a dumpster dive, darling?" he asked, his tone dripping with venomous sarcasm that cut deeper than any knife. He was enjoying this, feeding off the power trip of belittling someone he considered beneath him, totally unaware of the karma that observes such cruelty. It was a classic display of a billionaire punching down, using his status as a weapon against someone who couldn't fight back without losing her livelihood. "I apologize if my outfit disturbs you, sir," Gabriela murmured, her voice barely a whisper, demonstrating a restraint that Trent clearly lacked. She didn't retaliate or weep, she simply absorbed the blow, her dignity remaining intact despite the onslaught of insults. This quiet strength seemed to annoy Trent even more. Bullies hate it when their victims refuse to crumble, and he was determined to get a reaction. "It's not just disturbing, it's offensive to my eyes," he retorted, winking at his entourage who chuckled nervously, afraid to be on the receiving end of his wrath. He was treating a human being like a prop in his own twisted comedy, unaware that this was the prologue to a life lesson he would never forget. Trent leaned forward, his eyes scanning her outfit with the precision of a predator looking for a weak spot, shaking his head with exaggerated disappointment. "You know, people like you are the reason standards are slipping," he lectured, as if he were the gatekeeper of civilization itself. "If you can't afford taste, at least afford some self-awareness and stay in the kitchen." It was a brutal comment, designed to strip her of her confidence, a moment of drama that felt entirely unnecessary yet tragically common. He tossed a napkin at her as if dismissing a servant, totally blind to the person behind the uniform, failing to see the spark of intelligence in her eyes. The cafe fell into a hushed silence, the kind that usually precedes a storm, as everyone waited to see if the waitress would finally snap. But Gabriela Hermann just took a deep breath, her face a mask of calm, hiding the emotional turmoil churning within her chest. She knew who she was, even if he didn't, and that secret knowledge was the only shield she had against his arrogance. "I'll bring your bill, sir," she said, turning on her heel with a grace that belonged on a runway, not a cafe floor. It was a subtle act of defiance, a refusal to let his toxicity dictate her behavior, proving that class has nothing to do with money. As she walked away, Trent laughed again, a sound that grated on the ears of anyone with a conscience, proud of his petty victory over a service worker. See? They never learn unless you tell them, he boasted to his table, cementing his role as the villain in this social experiment. He truly believed he was doing the world a favor by policing aesthetics, oblivious to the fact that he was the ugliest thing in the room. The irony was palpable, a man obsessed with appearances who had a soul rotting with vanity. He had no idea that he had just insulted a fashion designer of immense talent, setting the stage for a plot twist of epic proportions. The air in the cafe remained heavy long after the laughter died down, a lingering sense of injustice that begged for vindication. Trent went back to his phone, dismissing the encounter as trivial, but the universe was already writing the next chapter. He had planted seeds of malice that would soon bloom into a thorny reality, one where his money couldn't save him from the truth. Don't judge is a simple rule, but for men like Trent Jones, it was a foreign language he was about to be forced to learn. The wheels of fate began to turn, and the clock was ticking down to a shocking reveal that would bring him to his knees. Cut to the sleek, cold interior of Jones Company, a fashion empire built on steel, glass, and the ruthless ambition of its CEO. Trent Jones stormed through the corridors like a hurricane, his presence alone causing employees to scatter and bury their heads in their work. This wasn't just a workplace, it was a dictatorship where one wrong look or one off-brand accessory could cost you your career. He viewed his company not as a team, but as a reflection of his own vanity, a place where money was the only metric of taste. If you don't look the part, you don't deserve the part, was his mantra, a philosophy that bred fear rather than creativity among his staff. He marched into the conference room, slamming a folder onto the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. "I saw the new sketches," he announced, his voice dangerously low, and frankly, I'm insulted by the mediocrity. He pointed a finger at a junior designer, a young woman shaking in her stylish boots. "You. That scarf. It looks like something my grandmother would use to dust furniture. Pack your things." The abrupt firing was a shock to the newcomer, but for the veterans, it was just another Tuesday.
Trent's leadership style was a brutal social experiment in survival, where talent mattered less than adhering to his rigid, soulless aesthetic. Trent collapsed into his leather chair, rubbing his temples as if surrounded by incompetence, genuinely believing he was the only one with vision. He was desperate to find a mysterious cipher, a secret identity designer taking the underground world by storm, unaware that he was searching for a ghost. "Why can't any of you produce something like Cypher?" he shouted, throwing a magazine featuring a blurred image of a stunning gown. "That is art. That is fashion. You are all just wasting my oxygen." His obsession with his fashion designer bordered on worship, a stark contrast to how he treated the actual humans in front of him. He picked up his phone, barking orders to his assistant about the upcoming fashion gala, the most important night of the year for his brand. "I need a showstopper, and since none of you can provide it, I'm going to find Cypher myself," he declared with arrogant certainty. He believed his bank account could unlock any door, that every artist had a price he could easily pay. It was a classic billionaire delusion, thinking that everything and everyone was a commodity waiting to be bought. He didn't understand that true art often comes from places of pain and passion, not from boardrooms and balance sheets. The atmosphere in the office was toxic, a breeding ground for anxiety where creativity was stifled by the fear of humiliation. Trent didn't see people, he saw mannequins that either fit his vision or needed to be discarded. He walked over to the window, looking down at the city, feeling like a god ruling over ants, completely disconnected from reality. "I want perfection," he muttered to his reflection, fixing his tie, "and I will destroy anyone who brings me anything less." This was a man setting himself up for a fall, building a tower of hubris that was destined to collapse. His cruelty wasn't just professional, it was personal, a deep-seated need to control and demean to feel superior. He checked his watch, annoyed that the world wasn't moving at his pace, his mind already drifting back to the tacky waitress from the morning. It bothered him that she hadn't cried, that she hadn't acknowledged his superiority, and that gnawing irritation fueled his foul mood. He needed vindication for his ego, a sign that he was indeed the master of his universe. Little did he know, The very person he was idolizing and the person he had mocked were one and the same. As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across his office, Trent remained alone at the top, isolated by his own malice. He was a king with no loyal subjects, only fearful servants waiting for the tyrant to fall. The stage was set for a drama that would strip him of his armor, exposing the insecure man beneath the designer suit. He was demanding a heart-touching masterpiece for the gala, but he lacked the heart to understand it. The countdown to the gala had begun, and with it, the countdown to his inevitable reckoning. Miles away from the gleaming skyscrapers, in a repurposed warehouse in the artistic district, a different kind of magic was happening. Gabriela Hermann shed her stained apron in the persona of the clumsy waitress, stepping into a world of fabric, color, and light. Here, she wasn't the girl who served coffee. She was a visionary known only as Cypher, the fashion designer the whole world was whispering about. The walls were covered in sketches and swatches, a chaotic symphony of genius that would make Trent Jones weep with envy. She worked undercover not out of shame, but out of a desperate need for genuine inspiration, away from the fake smiles of the industry. She ran her hands over a roll of silk, her fingers reading the texture like Braille, her mind racing with ideas born from the streets, not the salons. Her poverty was a choice, a social experiment she imposed on herself to reconnect with the raw, unfiltered humanity she had lost touch with. Real elegance is in the struggle, she whispered to herself, pinning a hem with expert precision. She was tired of the rich versus poor divide. She wanted to create clothes that told the truth, that bridged the gap between the penthouse and the pavement. This secret life was her sanctuary, a place where her secret identity allowed her to be truly free. Her assistant, a loyal friend named Marco, who was the only one in on the secret, watched her work with awe. Trent Jones was on the news again. "Screaming about finding you," Marco said, chuckling as he handed her a pin cushion. Gabriela smiled, a mischievous glint in her eye, thinking about the man who had called her tacky just hours before. "Let him scream," she replied, draping a mannequin with a revolutionary cut. "He wants the brand, not the artist. He wouldn't know real fashion if it served him a latte." The irony was delicious, a plot twist living and breathing in the quiet hum of the studio. This double life was exhausting, balancing the humiliation of her day job with the adoration of her secret career. But it was necessary. She needed to know if people could see beauty without a price tag attached to it, a test of character for everyone she met. Every insult Trent hurled at her was fuel for a fire, weaving the emotion of instant regret into every stitch she made, preparing for the day he would realize his mistake. She was creating a masterpiece of the gala, a gown that would be her confession and her weapon. It was going to be a shocking reveal, a moment where the art would speak louder than any CEO's shout. Gabriela paused to look at a sketch of a dress that flowed like liquid sorrow, inspired by the sad eyes of a woman she served that morning. This was heart-touching work, born from observation and empathy, things Trent knew nothing about. She wasn't just designing clothes, she was designing a life lesson for the industry that had become so superficial. Soon, she promised the empty room, feeling the weight of the coming storm. The masquerade was nearing its end, and the collision between Gabriela Hermann, the waitress, and Cypher the icon was inevitable. The solitude of the warehouse was a stark contrast to the noise of opulence, but it was here that the real power resided. She wasn't a victim, she was a master strategist playing a long game of karma. Every time she put on that tacky cardigan, she was donning armor, testing the world to see who was worthy of the truth. "Don't judge" was the theme of her collection, a silent scream woven into the very fibers of her creations. She was preparing to teach the world, and specifically one arrogant billionaire, that gold doesn't always glitter. As she turned off the lights, leaving the mannequins standing like silent sentinels in the dark, Gabriela felt a thrill of anticipation. The pieces were moving on the board, and checkmate was approaching fast. She locked the heavy metal door, stepping back out into the night as the invisible girl, holding the keys to the kingdom in her pocket. The romance she had with her art was the only love story she needed right now. But fate, as always, had other plans for her heart and her future. The bell above the door of opulence chimed again the next day, signaling the arrival of the storm named Trent Jones. He walked in with even more swagger than before, flanked by a sycophantic entourage that hung on his every word. Gabriela Hermann felt her stomach tighten, but she smoothed her apron and prepared for the onslaught, her secret identity burning like a coal in her chest. Trent spotted her immediately, a predatory grin spreading across his face as he steered his group toward her section. Well, if it isn't a fashion disaster, he announced loudly, ensuring the drama started the moment he sat down. He demanded she serve them, bypassing the other waiters, purely to assert his dominance and turn her shift into a living hell. Make sure you don't get any of your poverty on my Italian wool. He sneered as she placed the menus down. The table erupted in cruel laughter, a chorus of bullies validating their leader's nastiness. It was a scene of pure humiliation, designed to break her spirit, but Gabriela stood tall, her face serene. "Ill be careful, sir," she replied, her calm demeanor acting as a mirror that reflected his ugliness back at him. Trent wasn't satisfied with her passive resistance. He wanted tears. He wanted a scene that proved his superiority in the rich versus poor dynamic. "Tell me," he drawled, picking up a fork and examining it as if it were contaminated. "Do you even know what a thread count is? Or do you just wear whatever falls off the back of a truck?" His words were sharp, intended to cut, but they only sharpened Gabriela's resolve. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a sad, small man hiding behind a mountain of money. This wasn't just bullying, it was a desperate cry for validation from a billionaire who felt empty inside. "I believe style is about how you carry yourself, not what you wear," Gabriela said softly, a statement that silenced the table for a split second. Trent blinked, stunned by her audacity, before his face twisted into a mask of rage. "Excuse me?" He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Did the help just speak?" "I didn't order a side of philosophy with my espresso." He dismissed her wisdom instantly, too blinded by arrogance to see the life lesson she was handing him on a silver platter. He was digging a hole for himself, deeper and deeper, totally oblivious to the instant regret that awaited him. The cruelty escalated as the minutes ticked by. He snapped his fingers for refills, complained about the temperature of the water, and mocked her shoes. "It must be hard," he said with mock sympathy, "living a life where you're invisible to people who matter." It was a heart-touching moment for all the wrong reasons, witnessing such casual inhumanity. Gabriela just kept pouring coffee, her hand steady, her mind already back at her studio, designing a coat inspired by the coldness of his heart. She was gathering material, transforming his hate into art, turning the social experiment into a masterpiece. Other patrons were beginning to whisper, casting disapproving glances at Trent's table, but he interpreted their attention as admiration. He was a sun, and everyone else was just orbiting his brilliance. Or so he thought. "You should thank me," he told Gabriela as she cleared a plate. "I'm giving you the most excitement you'll have all year." The arrogance was breathtaking, a testament to how disconnected he was from the human experience. He had no clue that the woman he was tormenting held the future of his company in her hands. As he prepared to leave, he left a single penny on the tablia final. "Calculated insult. For your retirement fund," he quipped, walking away with a strut that screamed entitlement. Gabriela picked up the coin, looking at it not with anger, but with pity. Karma was coming, and it was going to be expensive. She pocketed the penny, a reminder of the man who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. The plot twist was winding tight, ready to snap back with the force of a hurricane. The lunch rush was in full swing when Trent Jones managed to spill a drop of dark roast coffee on his pristine, cream-colored lapel. Panic flashed across his face, a crack in the armor of the invincible billionaire. He frantically dabbed at it, making it worse. Gabriela Hermann, watching from a few feet away, didn't gloat. Instead, her instincts as a fashion designer kicked in automatically. She stepped forward, not as a servant, but as an expert, pulling a specialized cloth napkin from her apron pocket. "Don't rub it," she instructed firmly, her voice dropping in submissive tone. "Blot it. The friction will only set the tannin into the silk fibers." Trent froze, his hand hovering over the stain, caught off guard by the authority in her voice. For a second, the rich versus poor barrier dissolved, replaced by the universal language of textile care. Gabriela reached out, her fingers deftly manipulating the fabric, showing him exactly how to lift the stain without ruining the weave. "It's a delicate blend," she murmured, almost to herself, "If you treat it harshly, it will pill." It was a moment of undercover brilliance, a glimpse of her secret identity slipping through the cracks. She was offering him a lifeline, a subtle piece of expert advice that no ordinary waitress would know. But as the stain began to fade, Trent's ego roared back to life, offended that he needed help from a help. He snatched his jacket away, his face flushing with embarrassment that quickly turned to anger. "Get your hands off me," he snapped, dusting off the spot where she had touched him as if she were contagious. "I think I know how to handle a suit, considering I own the industry." His rejection was swift and brutal, a rejection of her kindness and her expertise. He missed the obvious clue standing right in front of him, blinded by his prejudice and need for humiliation of others. "I was just trying to help, sir," Gabriela said, retreating into her shell, the flash of the genius designer disappearing behind the mask of the server. "Silk is unforgiving." Trent scoffed, inspecting his lapel with a critical eye, refusing to admit that she had actually saved the garment. "Stick to wiping tables," he muttered, "and leave the fashion to professionals." The irony was so thick it was suffocating. He was dismissing the very professional he was desperate to hire. It was a tragic misconnection, a potential romance of minds crushed by stupidity. Gabriela walked back to the counter, shaking her head slightly, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. She had offered him a pearl, and he had trampled it into the mud. Don't judge was a lesson he seemed incapable of learning, no matter how many opportunities the universe gave him. She watched him preen in the reflection of the window, fixing the very lapel she had saved, taking credit for the save in his own mind. It was a perfect example of his delusion, a man who rewrote reality to make himself the hero of every story. This interaction planted a seed of doubt in the onlookers, a subtle shift in the drama. Why did the waitress know so much about silk blends? But Trent was too busy being the center of attention to notice the anomaly. He was so focused on maintaining his image that he failed to see the substance right under his nose. Instant regret was stalking him, waiting for the moment when he would look back on this interaction and realize what a fool he had been. The stain was gone, but the stain on his character was growing darker by the minute. Gabriela went back to work, her hands busy but her mind sharp, analyzing Cutter's suit, the flaws in his posture. She was dissecting him, not with malice, but with the clinical eye of an artist. He was her muse for a collection about vanity, and he didn't even know it. The shocking reveal was getting closer, and every act of arrogance was just another stitch in the grand tapestry of his downfall. The next day, Trent Jones arrived not with his entourage, but with a dainty, stunning, statuesque model who seemed more like an accessory than a companion. She was the epitome of high fashion, draped in expensive labels, but her attitude was even uglier than Trent's. She looked at the menu with disdain, looked at the cafe with boredom, and looked at Gabriela Hermann with utter contempt. The dynamic at the table was clear two predators feeding off the attention to room, playing a game of rich versus poor, where everyone else was a loser. "I can't believe we're here," the model whined, her voice grating. "It's so quaint." Gabriela approached to take their order, her notepad ready, bracing herself for the inevitable humiliation. Trent was eager to show off for his date, to prove his dominance by belittling the staff. "This is the one I told you about," he said to the model, gesturing at Gabriela like she was a zoo animal, the one with the tragic wardrobe. The model giggled, a cruel, tinkling sound. "Oh my God, Trent, you weren't kidding. It's actually painful to look at." They were a match made in hell, bonding over their shared lack of empathy, creating a toxic bubble of drama. As Gabriela placed their drinks on the tablier, a complicated order of iced herbal teas and sparkling waters, the model made a sudden, dramatic gesture with her hand. "Oops," she exclaimed, her arm flailing out and knocking a tall glass of beetroot juice right onto Gabriela's apron. It was clearly intentional, a calculated move to embarrass the waitress and assert dominance. The cold liquid soaked through Gabriela's clothes instantly, staining her tacky cardigan and her uniform. The room gasped, but Trent and his date just burst into laughter. "Maybe that's an improvement," the model shrieked. "At least now it has some color." Gabriela stood there, dripping, the sticky juice clinging to her skin, feeling the heat of humiliation rise in her cheeks. But she didn't run. She didn't cry. She took a slow breath, channeling the icy calm of a seasoned fashion designer facing a crisis before a show. "I'll get some towels," she said quietly, her dignity remaining bulletproof despite the assault. It was a heart-touching display of resilience, standing firm while the world tried to knock her down. Trent wiped a tear of laughter from his eye, totally failing to see the cruelty of the act. "Go clean yourself up," he dismissed her. "You look like a disaster." The cruelty of the moment was heavy, a physical weight in the air. The other patrons looked on in horror, witnessing a social experiment gone wrong, where wealth had eroded basic decency. Gabriela Hermann walked to the back, not in defeat but in tactical retreat. She knew that reacting with anger would only validate their low opinion of her. She chose a high road, a path that was lonely but noble. Karma was watching, tallying the score, and the bill for this behavior was going to be astronomical. Back at the table, Trent and the model high-fived, congratulating themselves on their wit. "She probably can't even afford to wash that," the model sneered, sipping her remaining water. They were drunk on their own power, oblivious to the instant regret that was brewing. They thought they were the kings and queens of the world, but they were just bullies in expensive clothes. The contrast between their outer beauty and inner rot was stark, a perfect theme for the story Gabriela was silently writing in her head. In the restroom, Gabriela dabbed at the stain, her mind racing. She wasn't angry, she was inspired. The splash of red on the drab fabric. It gave her an idea for a dress. Even in her lowest moment, her creative genius couldn't be suppressed. She was turning their hate into fuel, transforming their ugliness into something beautiful. The shocking reveal was going to be so much sweeter, knowing exactly who these people were when they thought no one important was watching. Minutes later, the Karma train arrived ahead of schedule. As the model stood up to go to the restroom, a loud rip echoed through the cafe. Her ultra-tight, ultra-expensive designer skirt had snagged on the rough edge of the chair, tearing a massive gash up the side, exposing her undergarments. The model froze, her face draining of color, instantly transforming from predator to victim. "Oh my God!" she screamed, clutching the fabric together. "My skirt, it's ruined. I can't walk out there like this." Panic set in, the drama shifting instantly as her facade of perfection crumbled. Trent looked useless, staring at the tear with horror, not for her dignity, but for the bad optics. "Well, fix it," he barked, offering zero solutions. "Don't just stand there flashing everyone." He was no help in a crisis, his billionaire power useless against a torn hem. The model began to sob, terrified of the humiliation of walking to the crowded cafe exposed. That's when the restroom door opened and Gabriela Hermann stepped out, her apron still damp but her eyes sharp. She saw the situation instantly a fashion emergency. Instead of gloating, instead of laughing as they had laughed at her, Gabriela stepped forward. "Let me see," she said, her voice commanding and calm. The model, desperate and out of options, didn't argue. Gabriela knelt down, pulling a safety pin from her pocket, a tool of her trade she always carried. With lightning speed and the dexterity of a master fashion designer, she gathered the torn fabric. She didn't just pin it shut, she pleated it, folding the tear inside a makeshift ruffle that actually looked like an intentional design element. It was a moment of undercover genius. "Stand still," Gabriela commanded, her hands moving like a blur. In 30 seconds, she had transformed a disaster into a new silhouette. She stood up and smoothed the fabric. "There, it holds the structure and hides a tear. You can walk out with dignity." The model looked in the mirror, stunned. The skirt looked better. "How did you do that?" she whispered, staring at the tacky waitress with wide eyes. It was a flash of the secret identity, a level of skill that couldn't be faked. Trent, watching from the table, frowned. He couldn't process what he just saw. A waitress fixing a 2000 skirt with a safety pin and making it look like couture? Lucky guess, he scoffed, trying to diminish her achievement. "Don't think you're a stylist just because you own a pin." He refused to give her credit, refused to see the talent, clinging to his rich versus poor worldview. But for a second, the model looked at Gabriela with something resembling respect, or at least confusion. The life lesson was hovering there, waiting to be grasped. "Thank you," the model muttered, almost inaudibly, before Trent's glare silenced her. Gabriela just nodded. Everyone deserves to keep their dignity, she said, a line that struck with the force of a hammer given the earlier events. She was teaching them kindness through action, a heart-touching response to their cruelty. She could have left the model to suffer, but that wasn't who she was. True elegance, she proved, was in the behavior, not the brand. As they left, the model kept touching the pin, bewildered. Gabriela went back to clearing the table, the genius invisible once again. But the seed was planted. The plot twist was gaining momentum. Trent had witnessed a miracle of improvisation and dismissed it as luck. His blindness was total, and it would be his undoing. The gap between what he saw and what was real was about to close, and the impact would be devastating. Later that afternoon, during a quiet lull, Trent Jones remained in the cafe, barking into his phone about the disastrous preparations for the gala. He was stressed, angry, and looking for a scapegoat. He headed toward the restroom hallway for some privacy, but stopped dead when he heard a voice, Gabriela Hermann's voice, drifting from the break room. She was on the phone, her back to him, unaware she was being observed. But her tone was different. Gone was a submissive servant. In her place was a commanding authority. "No, Marco, listen to me," she was saying, pacing the small room. "The bias cut on the velvet won't work if the silk lining is too heavy. It will drag the silhouette down. We need to switch to organza for the underlayer. And the neckline needs to plunge deeper. It has to scream vulnerability." Trent froze. Bias cut? Organza? Silhouette? These were terms of the trade, spoken with the confidence of a seasoned pro. For a second, a flicker of suspicion crossed his mind. Could the waitress be more than she seemed? Was this a secret identity situation? But then his arrogance kicked in, overriding his logic. He burst out laughing, stepping into the doorway and startling her. "Listen to you," he guffawed, clutching his chest. "Playing pretend? Did you read a fashion magazine in the trash and memorize the big words?" He leaned against the doorframe, shaking his head. "Stick to pouring coffee, sweetheart. Leave the bias cuts to the people who can actually afford the fabric." He crushed the possibility of the truth with his own prejudice, framing it as a pathetic attempt by a poor girl to sound important. Gabriela ended the call abruptly, her heart pounding. She had been careless. "I was just discussing a hobby," she stammered, reverting to her role to protect her cover. Trent smirked, feeling superior once again. "A hobby? Right. Like I have a hobby of flying to the moon. Don't quit your day job. Actually do. You're terrible at it." He used the moment to inflict more humiliation, taking pleasure in putting her in her place. He was so close to shocking reveal, yet miles away. "You speak about fashion like it's a religion," Trent mocked. "But look at you. You're a heresy." He walked away, chuckling to himself, thinking he had caught her in a delusional fantasy. He didn't realize he had just overheard the instructions for the very gown he was desperate to feature in his magazine. The irony was a heavy cloud over the scene. The fashion designer he would kill to meet was standing right there, and he was mocking her vision. Gabriela watched him go, a mix of anger and relief washing over her. He was impossible. His instant regret was going to be legendary. "You have no idea," she whispered to his retreating back. "You have absolutely no idea." The encounter strengthened her resolve. She wasn't just doing this for herself anymore. She was doing for every creative soul who had been crushed by a suit with a checkbook. The vindication was going to be public, and it was going to be loud. Trent sat back down, feeling better about himself after belittling her. He texted his assistant, still no lead on Cypher. Surrounded by idiots. If he had just listened, really listened, he would have found his star. But his ears were closed, anything that didn't sound like money. The midpoint twist was approaching, and he was walking blindly into the trap of his own making. The day before the gala, the tension in El Opulence reached a breaking point. Trent Jones was a bundle of nerves, furious that he still hadn't signed the mystery designer cipher. He needed a punching bag, and when he saw Gabriela Hermann smiling as she served a kind old couple, his temper snapped. How dare she be happy when he was miserable? How dare the tacky waitress have peace when the billionaire was in chaos? He decided right then and there to assert his ultimate power. He called the manager over, his voice loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. "She goes or I go," Trent declared, pointing a manicured finger at Gabriela. "Her incompetence is ruining my appetite. She's an eyesore, a distraction. Fire her." The manager, a spineless man terrified of losing Trent's business and influence, didn't even hesitate. He turned to Gabriela, who stood frozen, the pot of coffee trembling in her hand. "I'm sorry." "Gabriela," the manager mumbled, looking at the floor. "You heard Mr. Jones. Pack your things." It was a brutal, unfair dismissal, a pure act of malice designed to humiliation her one last time. Gabriela looked at Trent, her eyes wide with shock. "You're firing me because of how I look?" she asked, her voice shaking. Trent leaned back, a cruel smirk on his face. "I'm firing you because you don't belong in my world. You're a stain and I'm cleaning up. Consider it a life lesson. Know your place." The cruelty was absolute. He wasn't just firing her, he was trying to erase her, to prove that his whim could destroy her livelihood. It was the peak of the rich versus poor conflict, the moment where the villain thinks he has won. "Please," Gabriela said, not begging, but giving him one last chance to be human. "I need this job." Trent just laughed. "Then maybe you should have dressed for it. Get out." He waved his hand dismissively, turning back to his phone as if she had already ceased to exist. The cruelty was breathtaking. He had taken her income, her stability, just to make himself feel powerful for 5 minutes. It was a setup for instant regret, so massive it would crush him. Gabriela untied her apron, her hands steady now. The sadness in her eyes hardened into steel. She placed the apron on the counter, looking at Trent one last time. "You're right," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "I don't belong here." She walked out the door, the bell chiming a final farewell. Trent felt a surge of triumph. He had removed the eyesore. He had exerted control. He had no idea he had just fired the guest of honor for his own party. The cafe was silent, the other patrons disgusted but too cowardly to speak up. Trent sat alone in his victory, which was actually his greatest defeat. He had just severed the only connection he had to the inspiration he craved. By firing the waitress, he had unleashed a fashion designer. Gabriela Hermann was no longer bound by the rules of service. She was free and she was angry. The plot twist had arrived by trying to destroy her. He had set her free to destroy him. As Gabriela walked down the street, the tears finally came, but they were tears of determination. She pulled out her phone and dialed Marco. "It's done," she said, her voice cold. "Prepare the dress. Cypher is going to gala." The game was over. The war had begun. Trent Jones had wanted a show. She was going to give him one he would never forget. Gabriela Hermann sat in her studio, surrounded by the ghosts of her creations. The sting of being fired burned, but it was eclipsed by a burning need for vindication. Trent's words echoed in her mind, "Know your place." He wanted her to be invisible, to be nothing. But looking at the gown on the mannequin masterpiece of midnight blue silk and starlight crystals, she knew her place wasn't in the shadows. It was in the spotlight. She was devastated by the cruelty, yes, but she realized that Trent needed to see the truth, not just hear it, but see it. "He thinks money buys taste," she told Marco, who was furiously sewing the final hem. "He thinks poverty equals stupidity. I need to show him that he's been blind." This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. It was a social experiment reaching its climax. She decided to attend the gala not as an observer, but as herself Gabriela Hermann, the woman he fired, revealed as Cypher, the genius he worshipped. It was a gamble. It meant killing her anonymity, destroying the secret identity that protected her peace. But the message was too important. "Are you sure?" Marco asked, looking worried. "Once you walk out there, there's no going back. The press, the critics." Trent, Gabriela ran her hand over the fabric. "I'm sure. He needs to know that the person he stepped on is the person he's been chasing. It's the ultimate karma. She wasn't doing it to destroy him. Strangely, she was doing it to wake him up. It was a tough love, a heart-touching attempt to save a man from his own darkness by holding up a mirror. She spent the night preparing, transforming herself. The tacky cardigan was replaced by the gown. Her hair, usually messy, was styled into a sleek, regal crown. She looked at herself in the mirror and didn't see the waitress, she saw a queen. The transformation was physical, but mostly internal. She was shedding the skin of the victim and stepping into the power of the creator. The waitress was gone. The fashion designer had arrived. "He called me a stain," she whispered to her reflection. "Tomorrow will be the only thing he sees." The anticipation was electric. She imagined the look on his face, the shocking reveal, the silence that would fall over the room. It was going to be a scene of pure drama, scripted by fate and directed by her courage. She was terrified, but her anger gave her wings. The invitation to the gala sat on her desk sent to Cypher's agent. She picked it up, her ticket to the Lion's Den. Trent Jones was expecting a mysterious artist to bow down to him. Instead, he was going to get the woman he discarded, rising like a phoenix. The rich versus poor narrative was about to be flipped on its head. As dawn broke, Gabriela felt a sense of calm. The decision was made. No more hiding. No more serving coffee to ungrateful billionaires. It was time to serve the truth. The plot twist was locked and loaded. The gala waited, and with it, her destiny. The grand ballroom was a sea of diamonds, flashing cameras, and forced smiles. It was a night of the fashion gala, the pinnacle of the social calendar, and Trent Jones was at the center of it all, sweating through his tuxedo. He was desperate. The press was asking about Cypher, the mystery designer he had promised to reveal, but he had nothing. Shelby here. He lied to a reporter, his smile tight and fake. She's just making an entrance. Inside, he was panicking. He had fired his staff, alienated his allies, and now he stood alone on the precipice of humiliation. The room was filled with the elite, a parade of billionaire investors and critics ready to tear him apart if he failed. Trent scanned the crowd, his eyes darting wildly, hoping for a miracle. He saw his rival CEOs circling like sharks, smelling blood in the water. "Where is she, Trent?" One whispered mockingly. "Did you imagine her?" Trent clenched his fists. He needed Cypher to save him. He needed the art to validate his existence. He had no idea that he had fired his savior just 24 hours ago. The atmosphere was thick with drama and expectation. The lights dimmed, signaling the main event. Trent took the stage, the microphone trembling slightly in his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "Tonight, we redefine elegance. Tonight, I present to you the future of fashion." He gestured to the top of the grand staircase, praying that something, anything, would happen. It was a leap of faith into a void he had created. The crowd held its breath. For a long, agonizing moment, the staircase was empty. Trent closed his eyes, bracing for the laughter, for the instant regret of promising more than he could deliver. He felt the weight of his failures, the faces of the people he had hurt, including the waitress, flashing in his mind. He was a fraud, a man with money but no vision, about to be exposed. Then the music shifted. A haunting, melodic tune began to play, filling the silence. The murmurs stopped. All eyes turned upward. The doors at the top of the stairs opened slowly. Trent Jones looked up, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't know what to expect, but he certainly didn't expect the figure that emerged from the shadows. It was a moment suspended in time. The air left the room. The social experiment was about to conclude. The hunter was about to meet the prey, and the roles were about to reverse entirely. Trent wiped sweat from his brow, squinting against the spotlight. "Please," he whispered to the universe. "Save me." He was about to get exactly what he asked for, but in a package he had deemed tacky and worthless. The shocking reveal was seconds away. The waitress was in the building, and she wasn't there to pour drinks. The ballroom went silent, a hush so profound you could hear a pin drop. At the top of the stairs stood a vision of ethereal beauty. Gabriela Hermann descended, not walking, but floating. She wore a gown that defied description, a cascade of deep blues and shifting silvers that looked like she was wearing the night sky itself. It was a Cypher masterpiece everyone had been waiting for. The fabric moved with a life of its own, the cut expert, the style undeniable. It was a definition of high fashion, a slap in the face to anyone who doubted her. As she stepped into the light, the gasp from the crowd was audible. But it wasn't just the dress, it was the woman wearing it. She held her head high, radiating a regal power that silenced the critics. She wasn't the invisible servant anymore. She was a queen of the ball. Trent Jones, standing at the bottom of the stairs, squinted. The face was familiar, impossible. The structure, the eyes. It couldn't be. His brain tried to reject the information, clinging to his rich versus poor bias. That was the waitress. The girl in the knitted cardigan. The girl he fired. Gabriela locked eyes with him as she descended, her expression unreadable. She walked with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. Every step was a beat of vindication. The photographers went wild, flashes exploding like fireworks, capturing the birth of a legend. Who is she? Ripples through the crowd. That cipher. That's the designer. The realization spread like wildfire. The mystery was solved, and the answer was standing right in front of the man who had mocked her. She reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped inches from Trent. The shocking reveal hit him like a physical blow. He stared at her, his mouth slightly open, stripped of his arrogance. The tacky girl was a genius. The poverty he mocked was the source of the richness before him. It was a plot twist that shattered his reality. The woman he had told to stick to pouring coffee was the one saving his gala. "Hello, Trent," she said, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the silent room. It was the same soft voice, but now it carried the weight of authority. She didn't scream. She didn't need to. Her presence was a shout. She was a fashion designer he had been desperate to sign, and he had treated her like trash. The irony was so sharp it drew blood. The crowd watched, mesmerized by the drama. They sensed the history, the tension between the two. This wasn't just a fashion show, it was a reckoning. Gabriela Hermann turned to press, opening her arms to showcase the gown. "I am Cypher," she announced, "and this is my truth." The applause began slowly, then erupted into a thunderous ovation. Trent stood frozen in the eye of the storm, the instant regret washing over him in cold waves. He was small. He was insignificant next to her brilliance. He realized with horror that he was a villain of this story. The waitress had outshone the billionaire. Trent Jones couldn't move. His feet felt leaden, rooted to the spot as the applause for Gabriela Hermann washed over him. His mind was racing, replaying every cruel insult, every mocking laugh, every moment of humiliation he had inflicted upon her. "I fired her," he thought, the realization making him nauseous. "I told her she was tacky. I threw a penny at her." The memories were daggers, piercing his inflated ego. He had been worshiping an idol while spitting on the artist. The cognitive dissonance was blinding. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the genius he had missed. The dress was perfect, a very biased cut. An organza. He had laughed at her for mentioning on the phone. He had been so blinded by his rich versus poor prejudice that he couldn't see the talent standing in front of him. He felt exposed, naked in his ignorance. The industry icon he wanted possessed was the woman he had discarded. It was a life lesson delivered with the force of a wrecking ball. Gabriela glanced at him, seeing the shock in his eyes. She didn't smile, she didn't need to gloat. His face said it all. He was a man watching his world crumble. "You," Trent stammered, his voice lost in the cheering. "You're her." It was a statement of defeat. He realized that his money meant nothing here. He couldn't buy this moment. He had already sold it for the price of his arrogance. The instant regret was suffocating. Around them, the whispers began. People recognized her. "Now the girl from the cafe. Isn't that the waitress Trent yelled at?" Someone asked. "Oh my God, it is?" The narrative shifted instantly. Trent wasn't the discoverer of talent. He was the oppressor of it. The social experiment had yielded its results, and the data was damning for him. He was a fool who fired Picasso. Trent felt a hand on his Shadera rival CO, grinning. "Looks like you missed a diamond in the rough." Jones, the rival, whispered. It was salt in the wound. Trent pulled away, looking at Gabrielle with a mix of awe and shame. He wanted to run, to hide from the humiliation, but he was trapped in the spotlight he had created. He watched her handle the press with grace, answering questions about her inspiration. "My inspiration comes from real life. she said, her eyes flickering to Trent, from the struggle to be seen in a world that only looks at price tags. Her words were arrows, hitting the bullseye of his conscience. She was turning her pain into power, and he was the source of both. The shock began to fade, replaced by a deep, aching hollow in his chest. He had lost. He had lost a designer. He had lost a moral high ground, and he had lost his dignity. Karma had been served, cold and bitter. He stood there, a billionaire pauper, watching the wealth of talent he had thrown away. The applause died down and the sharks began to circle. A rival CEO, the head of a massive conglomerate known for poaching talent, stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. "Gabriela," he boomed, ignoring Trent completely. "This is brilliance. Forget Jones' company. It'll triple whatever they're offering. Come work for a real brand." It was a public business move, aggressive and tempting. The crowd gasped. This was the moment Trent Jones should have stepped in with a counteroffer, a contract, a war of dollars. But Trent did something unexpected. He stepped forward, not with a checkbook, but with his hands raised in surrender. He walked past the rival, standing between him and Gabriela Hermann. The room went quiet, expecting a fight. Instead, Trent looked at Gabriela, his eyes wet with unshed tears. "No," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm not going to talk business." He took a deep breath, stripping away the CEO persona, leaving just a man. "I need to apologize," Trent said, his voice amplifying over the speakers. "To you, to everyone." He turned to the crowd, then back to her. "I mocked you. I belittled you. I fired you because I was too blind to see that the elegance I was searching for was standing right in front of me serving coffee." It was a moment of raw honesty, a shocking reveal of his own vulnerability. He was confessing his sins on the biggest stage of his life. "I thought money equaled taste," he continued, "but I was the one with no class. You are the genius, Gabriela, and I am just a fool who couldn't see it." The admission was powerful. It wasn't a business tactic, it was a soul-bearing. He was risking his reputation to make it right. The drama shifted from conflict to redemption. He wasn't trying to buy her. He was trying to earn her forgiveness. Gabriela watched him, surprised. She expected a fight, not a surrender. She saw the regret in his eyes, the genuine pain of a man who realized he had been wrong about everything. This was the vindication she wanted, but it felt different, softer. It was heart-touching. He was destroying his ego to save his humanity. "I don't expect you to work for me," Trent said softly, off mic now, just to her. "I don't deserve you, but I am sorry. Truly." He bowed his head, awaiting her judgment. The rival seal looked confused. The crowd was stunned. Trent Jones never apologized. Karma had done its work, but now it was time for grace. The silence stretched, heavy with anticipation. What would the waitress do? She held all the cards. She could crush him, humiliate him as he had humiliated her. But Gabriela Hermann wasn't Trent. She operated on a different frequency. Gabriela Hermann stepped toward the microphone, the train of her gown rustling softly, a sound that seemed to echo like thunder in the quiet room. She looked at Trent, then at the rival CEO, then out at the sea of faces. She didn't take the rival's offer. She didn't scream at Trent. She smiled, a sad, wise smile. "Thank you for the offer," she said to the rival, "but this isn't about business tonight." She turned to Trent. "You were cruel," she said, her voice steady. "You judged me by my clothes, not my character. You thought poverty made me less than you." Trent flinched, accepting the blow. "But," she continued, "I accept your apology." The crowd exhaled, because tonight proved something important. True elegance isn't found in a price tag. It's not in a label or a VIP section or bank account. She raised a hand, gesturing to the room. Elegance is found in kindness. It's found in how you treat the person who can do nothing for you. That is the only luxury that matters. It was a powerful speech, a manifesto of the social experiment she had lived. She was redefining the industry's values in real time. If we dress beautiful bodies but have ugly hearts, we are just mannequins. The audience was captivated. This was the life lesson they didn't know they needed. Tears glistened in eyes that usually only look for flaws. Trent Jones looked up, struck by her wisdom. She was teaching him, saving him, even after everything. It was a display of grace that transcended the rich versus poor divide. "I am a waitress," Gabriela declared proudly. "And I am a designer. I am both, and neither defines my worth. My actions do." She looked at Trent with a softening gaze. "You have a lot to learn, Trent, but admitting you were blind is the first step to seeing." It was a moment of vindication, but it was also an invitation to grow. The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was raucous, emotional, genuine. People weren't cheering for the dress anymore. They were cheering for the message. She had touched their hearts. She had turned a humiliation into a movement. The plot twist wasn't that she was rich or famous. It was that she was kind in a cruel world. Trent stood beside her, not as a superior, but as a student. He felt smaller, yet somehow lighter. The burden of his arrogance was lifting. He looked at Gabriela not as an asset, but as a woman he admired deeply. The seeds of a new romance, one based on respect, were planted in that soil of forgiveness. The gala was ending, the lights coming up, but the magic lingered. Trent Jones and Gabriela Hermann stood alone on the runway as the guests filed out. The dynamic had shifted permanently. Trent looked at her, stripped of his bravado. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, "but I want to try. Not for the company. For me. I want to be the person you see in your designs." Gabriela looked at him, seeing the sincerity. The billionaire was gone, the human remained. "It's a long road," she said, a playful smile touching her lips. "You have a lot of tables to wait." Trent laughed, a genuine rusty sound. "I deserve that. I'll pour the coffee." It was a moment of connection, a bridge built over the ruins of their past conflict. "Start fresh?" Trent asked, extending a hand, not a handshake of business, but a peace offering. Gabriela looked at his hand, then at his eyes. She reached out and took it. "Fresh start," she agreed. The touch was electric, a spark of romance that promised a future neither expected. It was the end of the drama and the beginning of a partnership. They walked down the runway together, not as boss and employee, but as equals. The waitress and the CEO, united by a hard-learned lesson. Don't judge was no longer a cliche, it was their foundation. Trent had learned to value the woman over the wardrobe, the soul over the silk. As they exited the ballroom, the future was unwritten. Maybe they would build an empire together. Maybe they would just get coffee. But one thing was certain, Trent Jones would never look at a tacky outfit the same way again. He had found his muse, and more importantly, he had found his humanity. The story ended not with a transaction, but with a transformation. The heart-touching journey from cruelty to kindness was complete. Gabriela Hermann had revealed her secret identity, but in doing so, she had helped Trent find his true self. And that was the greatest design of all. Trent learned the hard way that the most expensive thing you can possess isn't a designer gown or a corner office, it's a kind heart. True elegance isn't about what you wear, it's about how you treat people when you think you have nothing to gain. If you also believe that respect is a universal currency and that humility is the ultimate superpower, then you have found your place. Subscribe right now and join our community of people who see the true value in others. Let's make some noise for kindness like this video to help us spread this message far and wide. Comment below with the word respect if you're on Gabriela's side, or tell me, have you ever been underestimated by someone arrogant? I want to read your story. And share this video with someone who needs a gentle reminder that character counts more than coins. And while you wait for our next adventure, know that our channel is a treasure chest of emotional stories just like this one. Explore our older videos and discover other unforgettable journeys of justice and redemption. And to ensure you don't miss the incredible stories we have lined up, turn on that notification bell right now. You won't want to be left out of the next emotional roller coaster.